This video is talking about this idea of taking ownership in our lives, sort of what does that look like and why it's important. But I want to start by breaking down a concept called locus of control. And this is a term used in psych, locus meaning center, so center of control. You can have either an internal locus of control or an external one. An internal one means you're working from a place of, frankly, ownership, right? You feel like you're in control of your life, where you're going, the decisions you're making, and you take a lot of responsibility for your actions. An external one means that is very much not the case, right? You feel very swept along by life and circumstances. You're not so much in control of where you're going or the actions you're taking. So you don't really take responsibility as much for your actions. An internal locus of control is very much a healthier, stronger place to be, especially from a mental health standpoint, because not surprisingly, it's a very stressful thing to feel like you don't have any control over your life. So on the one hand, it's a little bit easier in that you don't need to own up to your mistakes or take responsibility for what happens, but long term, it leads to like so much anxiety and stress. So I have an example of how this works practically from my own life. So one time I was going out with a group of friends, more like good acquaintances, right? I liked these people. They weren't like my best friends, but I was interested in getting to know them better and I wanted to be able to spend some time with them. So we went out for dinner, I think, which was good. And then I thought the evening was about ready to wrap up, which I was glad of because I wanted to go home and sleep because I had to get up early in the morning, but they wanted to go out a little bit longer. And I thought, oh man, this is like really frustrating. I wish they would call it a night because I want to go to bed. And I also don't want to be lame and leave early and either ruin the vibe for them or have them think that I'm, I don't know, annoying or not cool, right? As the case may be. And so I went with them for another couple hours, and sure enough, I got to bed a lot later than I wanted to, and I was irritated the whole time. And the next day when I was tired, I thought, this is not my fault. If it were up to me, we all would have gone to bed 2 hours earlier, and this never would have happened, right? We had already gone to dinner, we'd had a good time, why couldn't they just call it a night? And I realized at some point, because this was the type of pattern I would fall into a lot in similar circumstances, and I realized at some point that I was doing this, and I thought, that's lame. Like, that's not the way I want to live. And it's not really accurate either. I realized I was blaming these people without telling them or asking them. I didn't bring it up to them at all. This was all myself. I realized I was blaming these people for the time that I was getting to bed. And that made no sense. I'm the only one who can like brush my teeth and put myself in bed, right? So it was entirely up to me. And when I realized that, I thought, okay, let's take a little more responsibility here. Like, how can I take ownership of the situation? I realized then in trying to apply that in my life that it took a little bit of courage. I had to be able to actually advocate for myself when there was something I wanted that I wasn't sure other people would agree with. But 99% of the time, no one else cares at all. And then I got to do more of what I actually wanted in a given situation. In retrospect, I was making this shift from sort of giving up control, moving to an external locus of control. It's kind of deliberately taking it back and moving back to an internal one. Then I could decide for myself, maybe I did want to go out. Maybe we were having such a great time, I wanted to stay out another 2 hours, and I knew I'd be tired the next day. Then I still wouldn't be as grumpy about it because it was my choice. I had decided to do it, and that made a big difference for me. Okay, so this is actually a fairly cut and dried example. Let me give you like a little bit more difficult one that I had a harder time decoding. And I'm going to stick with the theme of sleep here because I love to sleep, and that would be insomnia. And that was so frustrating to me because I felt like I had already made the positive decision. I had already decided to go to bed on time. And now, for reasons outside my control, my stupid brain wouldn't turn off and I couldn't fall asleep. Right? That's how I felt about it. And I would lay there feeling so frustrated and angry about it, or just stressed. I would just think about all the stuff I had to do tomorrow and how tired I was going to be and how lousy the situation was. And that was pretty much my approach. And at some point, eventually, I fell asleep. Sure enough, I'd be tired the next day and irritable the whole time. And this was how I handled not being able to sleep. I'd kind of lie there feeling terrible about it for a couple hours. And it was very unpleasant. And again, at some point I realized I was doing this, and I once again thought that's not the best way to handle the situation. Like, there must be a better way to handle the situation. I hadn't brought the insomnia on myself. It was just suffering that had come to me. but I wanted to respond differently in the face of it. So I decided, okay, how about I read a book? Or maybe I'll pray. I'll just do something a little more proactive. And it did. It helped immediately, because even if I was tired the next day and I didn't feel my best, at least I had taken control over some part of it. If I was going to lay in bed not sleeping, I may as well do something that I enjoyed during that time. And also, not surprisingly, laying in bed thinking negative thoughts doesn't help anyone sleep. So doing something like reading also would help me fall asleep. But I realized again that even in the face of circumstances that are outside of our control, if you can't control the circumstance, you can at least control your response. And that was, again, shifting back to an internal locus of control. And it helped so much that the unpleasant circumstance inherently became less miserable as well. So this was a great discovery. And I realized, putting the two of these kind of circumstances together, though I've had many, many, many experiences like it, I started to realize that complaining, actually the act of complaining, always moves one from an internal to an external locus of control. And this is such a useful tip. It's like a little life hack. You can just look for times you're complaining and you know you're giving up control. And let me clarify a point here. Complaining is different than just naming a problem, right? Life is hard. There are difficult things. Talking to yourself, talking to other people about struggles you're having, about a circumstance that's really unpleasant, about some kind of suffering, is not actually necessarily complaining. Complaining is saying, this bad thing is happening to me and there is nothing I can do about it, and I am overcome. I am just doomed to be miserable because of this person or this thing that happened or this element of my life that I have no control over. See, inherently, that way of thinking, it's giving up control. You're moving to this external locus of control. You're saying there's nothing I can do. That's complaining. So, very cool thing. Naturally, very logically, the opposite of that is gratitude. And this makes a lot of sense to me because I'd heard for years about the importance of gratitude. And they did all these studies on how good gratitude is for mental health and physical health too, actually, for that matter. But it didn't used to make a lot of sense to me because gratitude also gets a rap for being kind of cheesy, right? Like, oh, count your blessings. Like, isn't that sweet? And I think it's easy to approach gratitude almost with an attitude of sarcasm. Like, yeah, sure, I'll list out these things I'm grateful for, I guess. You betcha. But not actually mean it sincerely. But in this context of seeing, like, gratitude is inherently taking ownership. You're putting yourself back in the driver's seat. You're in control of your life. These are positive things that you want to move towards. You're cultivating that awareness. Like, of course it has a myriad of benefits. Like, it actually makes so much sense. So my 2 tips to wrap up this video. If you're looking to take more ownership and a little more control in your life, have a greater sense of responsibility for your actions and your goals and where you want to be going, 2 things I would recommend doing. The first is to keep practicing self-awareness. Take stock at the end of the day. What were the choices you made? Were there instances where you really gave up control over a situation or a choice that was very much your own? And how could you do that differently in the future? And then take 2 minutes a day to practice gratitude, to say, gosh, what are the things that I'm really grateful for today? What was positive? And this will help us to detect like patterns and things that we appreciate. Who are the people I'm associating with who treated me kindly? How am I grateful for that? And then you'll realize these are maybe good people in your life. What's the work I'm doing that I'm grateful for? Maybe it's work I want to keep doing, right? It's building an awareness and a greater sense of where we want to be going in life. What's the direction we want to move in? So those are my 2 tips. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, go ahead and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.